Hello, my name's Jorb. I love gear. I'm in Berlin. Superbooth 2025. You probably know about Superbooth, but if you don't, it's the best synthesizer event I've ever been to. 3 days in this awesome venue that's like a huge multi-purpose event space, but it's inside and it's outside, and there's more gear than you could ever see in a day and more people than you can talk to in the 3 days. It's really great. Anybody who has a chance to go, I recommend you go. I like spending time with hardworking, creative people. It inspires me to be more of both of those things, and I feel recharged by it in a way. That was wonderful. I love that part of it. I also love seeing new gear. I also love trying new instruments and seeing what people have come up with. So why don't we get right to it? The first thing I had seen announced in advance that I wanted to try was the Frap Tools Magnolia. Magnolia is an 8-voice analog polysynth with a pretty unique oscillator setup. There's two oscillators. There's two oscillators that can function as a carrier and modulator pair. 2-operator FM, but through 0 FM. And there's also a wavefolder. So to me, rather than thinking of it as like FM, which I've seen some people describe, it's more of like a West Coast oscillator section on an analog poly. It's like a complex oscillator on an 8-voice analog, which is still cool. That's a unique architecture. The unit that was there was for sure a prototype. The presets weren't totally there, and some of the controls were like a range I didn't love. So if you're like, man, this demo sucks, my bad. Things like that will get polished up. For sure the effects weren't ready, and I think like a reverb would have maybe played differently. But what's here is great. It's an interesting oscillator concept, and the panel layout is cool. The thing looks cool, looks good. That totally matters. And Frap Tools had just made modules before, and I love seeing small companies. I like big polyphonic stuff. I want more people to make big polyphonic stuff. I'm happy this exists, and I'm excited to see, or hear rather, presets that people have made once they really are comfortable with it, and it's and every part of it is finished. I think there's a lot of potential for this to be super, super interesting. Next, another polyphonic synthesizer, the GS Music Brie 6. I've definitely talked about this before. I think a KnobCon video. I tried it. The same company as the E7. If you saw my video on that, it's really similar in a lot of ways to the E7. But it isn't just a pared down E7. It's sort of a different approach. A big part of that is just one oscillator that has almost like its saw, square, and a sub oscillator, or any combination of those three, which is very Juno-y. But it had things like stereo panning, which the E7 did. The effects on it sounded really, really good to me. Some of the sounds felt almost Oberheim-y. I don't know if that was just because pulse width and stereo movement makes me think of Oberheim stuff, or the synth was just blue, and that made me think of Oberheim. Regardless, it sounded really, really good. There's some clever arpeggio modes. You can hit 2 or 3 notes for every trigger of the arpeggio, and it will do sort of chord inversions of what you played, which is really, really neat. The unison mode has an interval setting, so you can set up sort of 1-note chords in a way that's simple and makes a lot of sense. I'm looking at my notes, and that is it. It's a modern analog poly with good feel. There's a desktop version and a keyboard version. You're watching me play the keyboard version. Yeah, that's it. Modern analog poly, good feel, good sounds. I hope everybody buys one, honestly. Here's something that I didn't fall in love with, the PPG 1002. It is something that wasn't on my list going into it. Somebody had mentioned it to me, maybe in the Discord, mentioned that it got announced. I was just walking by and I saw it, and I was like, oh, that's that thing. And I played it, and I liked it, so I got audio. But I had no idea it was $10,000. It sounded cool, it sounded good, and I'm fascinated by older synths, interfaces, especially in terms of like modulation. Like, what did they think would be relevant to this? In effect, decisions like that like define the character of old synths like that before there were sort of standards or mod matrices. The choices they made becomes, you know, the identifying part of that thing. But yeah, knowing it's $10,000 like kind of makes me mad about it. Like, I looked at the website to see if there was any justification for the price, like some hyper-specific manufacturing, some hyper-specific part. It doesn't seem like there is. If there is, they're not open about it, or they aren't marketing it, you know, with that in mind. And I think that sucks. Being limited, whatever, maybe it's handmade, whatever. Can you think of a monosynth that is $10,000 that isn't vintage? I can't. So the only justification in my head is they're looking at the prices of the old ones and saying, oh, they only made, I don't know how many of them, less than 200 or whatever. They only made so many of them, and you can buy a vintage one for $15,000, for $20,000, and it doesn't have a warranty and it isn't new or whatever. We can get away with charging $10K. I think that is whack. I think that's not cool. That's it. I don't want to be negative, actually. It sounded really, really good. I hope you don't buy one, okay? How about something that left me with a positive impression? The Polyend Mess.
Check. Yo, Jorb. So I'm gonna pitch it down with a great. This is a snobby sequence, and then there it can be higher than a snobby peaky, and then I can add some reverb. Because I don't even. Yeah, that's for. You want me to stop, Jordan?
And shout out Mitch for doing the vocal demos. I think it's actually really useful to hear, because it's so obvious when something's changing with a voice. You know what I mean? You'll notice that. I think it's really actually useful for something sequenced like this. Anyway, what is it? It's a multi-effect with a sequencer. It's like really brought to the front, which I haven't seen. And it seems like kind of obvious now that somebody has done it. Sure, you could like sequence effects on groove boxes. Of course, there are effects that have sequencers, you know, as part of their design. But to have the sequencer tied to a multi-effect, it just made a lot of sense. So being able to sync it with other gear and having a drop or a change from a bridge to a chorus or whatever being included in the sequence of the hardware effect, like opens up what you could be using it with. But I guess what could like a sequenced effect be? It could be a delay changing times, you know what I mean, per step, a drive pedal, a drive effect, changing gain, a chorus with modulated rate. I think of the Boss Slicer as a sort of stepped effect, but you have no access to control the sequencer on that thing. So this, like, the more I sat with it and the more I talked about it, the more I tried it, like, I thought of more use cases and it became more and more exciting. I hope it catches a lot of people's interests because it's like a good new idea. Polyend has done it again. Okay. Somewhat related to that, this is the Neuzeit Drop. I didn't get any audio. That booth was crazy while I was there because people are like word of mouth talking about how cool this is. But anyway, it's like a MIDI CC controller. So it's like a bank of faders. You've seen that. But the big thing, it's like really geared towards performance. Okay, so you have all these snapshots, which is cool in and of itself. It's a panel element. It's a control element to jump between sort of presets of MIDI CC that you can send up to whatever other hardware, one or a few things. That's cool on its own, but there's like a sequencer. Sequencer can interact with those snapshots. So the namesake feature, the drop feature, say you want to tweak all your knobs, you're turning up your drums, you're turning up their decay, you're increasing like the send of a reverb or whatever. You're building up this part of your song to be a drop, like through the controls on this MIDI controller, right? But what this does, you can say at the end of 4 bars or whatever, at the end of 16 bars, return to that snapshot. So you do all this live performance tweaking, and then without you remembering every parameter or doing anything else, it reverts to that snapshot, or it moves to a different snapshot. It was sick. It was like Groovebox features. I'm saying a lot of the same things I said about Mess, I think. But it was like Groovebox features for whatever MIDI-controlled hardware you could think of to plug it in. I thought that was awesome. That felt scattered. I hope you understand how cool it was. I hope people do demos soon. I saw another controller I really liked. It was the Continuo from Musonics. My friend Student Tie Guy, shout out. It's just a prototype panel right now. It'll eventually be a standalone box. There's really not that much to say. It's like a simple, straightforward MIDI sequencer. You send notes in, maybe SH101 style, or maybe you're arpeggiating them, and then it sends them back out. What else could you want? Something that simple added to a synthesizer that doesn't have a sequencer. You could just turn off local control, run it to the Continuo, back into the synthesizer, and now something that didn't have a simple, straightforward sequencer does. I think it's a great idea. That's it. Moving on. This is also chronological, kind of. So while I was leaving that booth, I got caught up in conversation, went to another place, and I walked past the ESI Xsynth. I hadn't even seen anybody talk about this. I didn't recognize it. I just thought that's a crazy form factor for something that actually makes sound. And then I tried it and it sounded good, so I started recording audio. I barely knew while I was playing it what it could do or what it was. There were some, materials around, marketing materials around, whatever. It was an 8-voice virtual analog thing, but the oscillators could be samples instead of just like a virtual analog wave. And it sounded good. And the interface was like, not menu divey or whatever, but pretty, I wouldn't say like menu divey. There was a little screen and you redirect these 4 like control knobs to do other stuff. So it was easy for me to be like, this would sound good with reverb, FX, turn that up. This would sound good with a different envelope, press that, turn it up. And I like that, something that's straightforward. Plus the form factor was like crazy. And then I find out it was polyphonic aftertouch. That's it. It was a cool form factor. It wasn't that expensive and it sounded good. Check it out. Pardon me if I'm for sure. I saw in the Clank Uronograph. I don't know, and the labeling on the panel was like unreadable, but the hands you'll see in the clip are the ever insightful Oscillator Sync. If you don't know, he has a wonderful channel, very in depth, and I'm so glad I was with him when I tried it. I would have frankly been a little more dismissive of it if I didn't have someone, if I wasn't with him who's so willing to dig into things. But he said this is the worst environment to try and learn something like this. We didn't have headphones on. It was open in the space. You could hear all sorts of other people playing. But he still got some really interesting sounds out of it, and I don't think I really did. So that's why you're seeing his demo. I, of course, thought of the Soma stuff. It felt similar to that, like the capacitive controller part of it, the keypad part of it. But that similarity is honestly pretty superficial. The approach to sound design was different. This is a much more obvious signal path, I would guess, than some of the Soma stuff, which feels sort of secret, while you sit down and play it. But I liked the sound of the effects. I didn't get really invested in the vision of the capacitive keyboard, I guess. It didn't feel like expressive or controllable in the way something this experimental, I think, could benefit from. The capacitive, those sort of touch plates do react to how quickly you press them. There's sort of a velocity sensitivity, but I wanted to slide and move, and that felt sort of rigid in the sound engine. But again, it was a tough environment to learn anything more. I could see the potential, especially with like non-traditional scales or people who want to do ambient stuff with an interface that lends itself to more interesting things. And I think this succeeded in that, in being different in a way that has like legitimate value. Cool, great. I fucked up the audio. I'm so sorry. The Majella Implexus. I fucked up the audio and went back to record it and deleted the wrong clip while I was still at the venue. So I'm embarrassed by it. My first instinct is just not mention that and tell you, hey, I tried this thing and I messed up, the video production thing that is my job. But I found it so fun that I think it just deserves attention. It's a mono synth with West Coast inspired oscillators, and tons of other stuff has done like the bi-coastal inspiration at this point. Like that's not totally new and fresh, but the interface on this was so good, and even just like the panel sort of visuals I felt were so engaging that I had a blast playing it. And whoever was running the booth, I normally ask, is there something you'd like to highlight if people ask if I need any help? And he opened the filter all the way up and stopped the sequencer I had running from the key step and got all of the harmonics from manipulating the wave folder and got all of the rhythm from LFOs to the oscillator or the wave folder again. And that sounded like really, really cool. God, I wish I had the demo. Anyway, Implexus is dope. You should check it out. I don't know how I missed it. The third wave, the Groove Synthesis third wave, there's a smaller version now. I think it's the 8M. It's a module, fewer panel controls. It's 2 parts instead of 4. It's 8 voices instead of 24. But if you're familiar with the PPG stuff, PPG Wave 2 point whatever, it was a sort of wavetable synth. There were analog filters. Plus, the new version of it does everything the old one did, accurately recreating that signal path, plus FM, plus some other analog synthesis, plus samples. It's really, really cool. But it's less the sort of this specific reissue or this specific instrument I want to talk about, and more the idea that like companies that make really premium, really expensive stuff, getting like a smaller pared down version that still has like, that has enough of the sound or the sort of idea behind the instrument is awesome. I'm not calling anybody out. When I think of things like UDO, how cool would a cheaper, smaller version of their really, really cool technology, their really, really smart sound design, all that. So to see a company put out a smaller version of the big premium thing, I always liked that. And it sounded awesome. I don't know if the demo will do it justice, but there's like an Art of Noise patch that I was like totally getting. I wish I actually knew that riff. Next, the Korg Phase 8. You've probably seen me talk about it when it was still a prototype, but this is what the final product is going to be like. The video demo wasn't that long, and I'm probably talking or laughing or, making some dumb remark in the middle of the clip. But I'm stoked that this is what this looks like as a final product. For a big company to put out something that's sort of like different and new and experimental is sick. It's the sort of thing you would expect a small company to be taking a risk on or like making 10 of, you know what I mean? But this is something a big company has deemed interesting enough and also like viable enough to make into a full product. And it's the sort of energy and the sort of mentality that I hope that other companies, sort of follow suit moving forward, that there are new ideas in the music tech space. And you can take what seems to me to be like a legitimate risk on stuff if it's a good enough idea. If the price is reasonable, please buy one when it comes out. Signal to every company that different stuff like this is worth making and people will buy it. If I think back on things that I saw and didn't get to try, I would have liked to try the IntelliGel mixer. I think that seemed like a good form factor, really smart. I would have liked to try the Oxy One Mark II. But yeah, there's things you don't get a chance to see. Even though I was there all 3 days and I was there all day, each of those days, I'm spending so much time talking to people and talking about these things that, can you feel that I'm transitioning into a note-free finale about how awesome people are? But I really do mean it. The only way I get to do this and get to be here is if people appreciate my work, and people do. And having strangers walk up and say, hey, I recognize you. I like the stuff you've done. I appreciate, this video or that video. It helped me figure this out, or it helped me understand this. That is like the best feeling. It feels so, so good to have people appreciate what I've done. And I find it really, really motivating that people have benefited or been entertained or whatever by me just sort of babbling about stuff that I'm passionate about. So it means a lot. I'm grateful to be here every time I'm here. I try and like really appreciate this time surrounded by creative, hardworking people, and I love that. And I really mean that. It's awesome to be here. I'm proud to be here. I'm flattered to be here. That's it. Superbooth 2025 was wonderful. Very revitalizing. I have a couple videos that are in progress. I have a couple new pieces of gear that I didn't mention in this video that you'll see on the channel soon. Subscribe if you want to see them. If you're a patron, that means the world to me. I'm out of order. Can you guys tell I'm tired? It is 3:37 a.m. I have a flight. I have to leave for my flight. But that's it. I'm cutting myself off. Thank you. My name's Jorb. I love gear. Superbooth 2025. Thanks for watching. Cheers and so long. Bye-bye.